Hello, class. This lecture is titled The Souls of Black Folk, an Introduction, by Dr. Malencia Johnson for Sociology of the Black Experience, SOCY 365. Let's first talk about the author, W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois was born in Massachusetts in 1868 and died in Ghana in 1963. He published at least 2 books or articles every year of his academic career. He was the first African American to earn a Ph.D. from Harvard University in 1895. Of course, he earned a degree in the best major ever, sociology. Du Bois started studying African American life in America early in his career. That research led him to a push toward social reform. He was part of the Niagara movement, which eventually developed into the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, in 1909. He created the Crisis magazine to distribute the message of ending racial injustice and remained an editor for decades. The magazine is still in circulation today. Click on the link to learn more about the NAACP. Du Bois was also the founder of the Atlanta School of Sociology. He pioneered positivist research practices that utilized mixed methods. Du Bois is also an extremely underrated and underdiscussed sociologist. He was the first to use interviews to supplement statistical analysis in large and small-scale research that centered the Black community. Let's talk about the text. The Souls of Black Folk was published in 1903. This was a time where the South was still recovering from the end of slavery. Signifying the closeness to this time, each of the chapters begins with an old spiritual, often called Negro or slave spirituals or sorrow songs. These songs were significant in how they allowed for cultural transmission from generation to generation of illiterate peoples. Each chapter has the underlying and overt theme of Black-white race relations. Be sure to read each chapter a couple times to find the nuances of race in the late 1800s and early 1900s. I've listed 2 of the most famous quotes from the book. You may have seen or heard these quotes before. The first one, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line." You will encounter this quote in Chapter 2 of The Dawn of Freedom, as Du Bois discusses how the problem of the construction of race in America is not the fault of African Americans themselves. The second quote, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at one's self through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, 2 souls, 2 thoughts, 2 unreconciled strivings, 2 warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder." This quote gets at the heart of the reality of most African Americans being judged by a white middle-class measuring rod. I chose to have you read The Souls of Black Folk because 1, everyone should read it, and 2, because it explores a variety of social issues from the perspective of African Americans in the late 1800s that are still relevant today. We will explore the themes of racism, classism, infant mortality, education inequity, economic mobility, employment, political disenfranchisement, the importance of religion, and industrialization. The text also offers a sprinkling of solutions to the racial inequity perpetuated through a system of oppression. Du Bois discusses how the right to vote, civic equality, and the ability to be educated according to the academic ability of the individual would elevate the status of African Americans. After reading this text, you should be able to interpret the individual experiences of African Americans presented in the text, describe Du Bois's concept of double consciousness, evaluate the tools Du Bois mentions are needed for African American progress, connect the problems of the 20th century in regards to race to the problems that we encounter today, discuss the African American experience living within the veil, and explain racism faced by African Americans post-Reconstruction. Now, go read your book. You can click on the link for a free online PDF version of The Souls of Black Folk. Happy reading!